Bhavena features, he only, Param most glorious, Drashtam to see, Arhanti deserve, Surayaha great devotees. Translation and purport to His Divine Grace Abhay Charan Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The great transcendentalists thus describe the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the pure devotees deserve to see more glorious things in transcendence beyond these features. Purport. The Lord is not only the creator and destroyer of the material manifestations of His different energies. He is more than a simple creator and destroyer, for there is His feature of Ananda, or His pleasure feature. This pleasure feature of the Lord is understood by the pure devotees only and not by others. The impersonalist is satisfied simply by understanding the all-pervasive influence of the Lord. This is called Brahman realization. Greater than the impersonalist is the mystic who sees the Lord situated in his heart as Paramatma, the partial representation of the Lord. But there are pure devotees who take part in the direct pleasure, Ananda, potency of the Lord, by effectual reciprocation of loving service. The Lord in His abode called the Vaikuntha planets, which are eternal manifestations, always remains with His associates and enjoys transcendental loving services by His pure devotees in different transcendental humors. The pure devotees of the Lord thus undergo a practice of that devotional service to the Lord during the manifestation of the creation and take full advantage of the manifestation by qualifying themselves to enter into the kingdom of God. The Bhagavad Gita 18.55 confirms this. Bhaktiyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvataha tatumam tatvato nyatva vishate tat anantaram. By development of pure devotional service, one can factually know the Lord as He is, thus be trained in the bona fide service of the Lord, and be allowed to enter into the direct association of the Lord in so many capacities. The highest glorious association with the Lord is made possible in the planet Golaka Vrindavana, where Lord Krishna enjoys himself with the gopis and his favorite animals, the Surabhi cows. A description of this transcendental land of Krishna is given in the Brahma Samhita, which is considered by Lord Sri Chaitanya to be the most authentic literature in this connection. Om Mahyanati Mirandasya Granchana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishnam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadate Sapadantikam Mandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Paragamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshtam Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshtam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gauranga Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhashcha Kripa Sindhubhaya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhya Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are in the last famous chapter of second canto Bhagavatam, and it's the answer to all questions, where we hear about the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam and how, with the understanding that there's this one 10th topic, the Ashraya of all the others, Krishna himself, but we study the other 9 in order to more fully understand the Ashraya of the others, the Summum Bonum, Lord Krishna himself, and that we have full impetus to also then to take shelter of this ultimate shelter of everything else in existence. And so we discussed this chapter mainly then about the Sarga, the first topic, the creation of this material cosmos. And we heard it through the understanding of the Virat Rupa to come to a personal understanding of the Lord, who help us with that, and then with the three principles, Adidaivika, Adhyatmika, and Adibhautik. And then it was pointed out that still completely different from the Virat Rupa is then the Lord's transcendental, eternal, personal form, which eternally exists in the spiritual sky, in the all different Vaikuntha planets, and of the supreme planet of which, as we hear in today's purport also, is Golok Vrindavan, where Gopinath, Krishna himself, is there, enjoying eternally with his devotees, as we have today such a beautiful purport. And so, yeah, let's look through. So there's many beautiful points that Prabhupada made. And first he starts off by explaining that, because the last few verses that we discussed before were that even creation, which comes along then with the needs maintenance, and then at the end dissolution, which is, as we know, done by through controlled or done through the three gunavartas of the Lord, as maintaining he does himself personally as Lord Vishnu, creating the secondary creation he does through Lord Brahma, whom he empowers with the Srishti Shakti, and Lord Shiva is then the one, or Rudra, the one who does the dissolution. But still all of them are directly under their servants, like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, servants of the Lord, and so it's still directly by the will of the Lord and depending on the Lord. So it's done by him also in that sense. But today now it's pointed out that understanding the Lord as being the creator alone, this understanding is quite primitive, because the Lord is so much more than just the creator of, even though when we look out, like we as tiny living entities, when we look out in even just this one planet, it seems like so inconceivably huge and vast in terms of quantity of like everything that exists, all the elements, all the living beings, and also in terms of variety of different species and different materials and so many things. So it seems for us, from the viewpoint of a tiny living entity, Jiva, a small part and parcel of the Lord, it seems, thinking of that there's one person who is able to create all this that itself is inconceivable. So that itself seems like it's, thinking of God as the creator, that is, what more than that can there be? But as we know, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada, that there's so much more than that actually. That creation, that's an insignificant pastime of the Lord compared to all his other eternal pastimes. It is also a pastime, because the Lord, all his pastime implies that it is simply pleasure. For the Lord there is no, as we discussed recently also, there is no question of work, there is no question of physical exertion or anything like that. Because he is the summum bonum, which means that everything emanates from him, and what emanates? There emanates a variety of energies, of very potent energies. So for all different things that one could imagine or couldn't even imagine, that the Lord wants to be done. And Parasa Shakti Vividaya Suvate. So all these energies, perfectly do or act for the pleasure of the Lord. And so creation is just one insignificant thing for that. But still we know the Lord because he has his pure love for all his parts and parcels. So still he personally expands to Karanaka, like through the different expansions, then to Karanataka Vishnu, then Karbhutaka Vishnu, Kshirodaka Vishnu, where he still personally is also present for the material creation, with the material creation. to personally make sure that everything is done perfectly, that the living entities have done full facility to, on the one hand, misuse their independence by trying to lord over material nature, but at the same time have full opportunities to those who are sincere to come back to Him, go back to Godhead, and especially in the human form of life, as we discussed it, I think just yesterday in the purport at the end. Prabhupada didn't have time to go into that, but this privilege of the human form of life, and also actually responsibility of human beings to take this opportunity. So, atato brahmachinasa means atata means now, the Vedas say, now is the time to inquire into the absolute truth. And this now specifically, especially refers to now that you are in the human form of life. Because in other forms of life it is not really possible, or not as conducive as in the human form of life to inquire into the absolute truth and engage in self-realization. So the Lord still personally does make sure the creation happens perfectly, but at the same time He doesn't directly touch material nature as discussed, but rather He does that then through His glance as Shambhu, as Lord Shiva. And but still beyond all of that are His personal pure pleasure pastimes. I mean, everything the Lord does is, for Him, it's simply pure pleasure. Just as I said, there's no question of Him having to go any trouble or any kind of work, any anxiety in terms of as we experience it in the material world. But if the Lord has anxiety, then it is out of pure love and also His pleasure, like anxiety for His devotees. But as similarly as the devotees, pure devotees have pure anxiety for the Lord. As you know, like Mother Yashoda, for example, and his parents and all other elderlies who are in Vatsalya Prem, they have always anxiety for the safety of Krishna and for the well-being of Krishna. They think that he is dependent on their maintenance, on them taking care of him very nicely. So that is then in pure love. That is different anxiety. But for the Lord, there's no question of us when we act in the material world, when we work so hard and we go through so much trouble and face so many problems. But for the Lord's pleasure, there's never, be it in relation with the material world or in the spiritual world, there's never a question of any slightest problem that He would face. Rather, it's all perfectly happening for His pleasure, because, He is the Summa Bonum. Everything simply acts under His control, and what we come to now is more important than just being the creator and the controller, is that the ultimate highest is pure love. Because understanding the Lord as simply being the creator and the controller is the conception of understanding there's a supreme personality, there's God, and which is good. People should come to that understanding, especially nowadays most people lack this understanding, but that itself doesn't allow this pure love as we see it in the highest spiritual planet in Golok Vrindavan, because it implies that you're conscious of simply of the Lord's greatness, of Him, that you understand that I'm tiny, I'm not able to control what I want, like I experienced that in the material world. I tried so hard to control everything according to how I like it and then be happy in that way, but I failed, and so I came to an understanding that there is a person completely beyond me who is the actual controller, who is controlling everything, who has created everything and who is controlling everything. But then naturally from that comes simply awe and reverence, which is good for especially for a beginning, and it is also eternally present in the spiritual sky and all the Vaikuntha planets, and to a large degree even in Dwarka and Mathura. But yeah, it has its limits in terms of the mellows, how they, and the intensity of them, how they can be exchanged between the devotee and the Lord, because there's naturally some distance to the Lord if you have this awe and reverence, this fear, and so you can't render, and you are considering yourself, knowing yourself dependent on the Lord, and you also serve the Lord in that way. Yes, I want to serve you, my Lord, but what can I do? Actually, I am fully dependent on your maintenance, on your protecting me and all of that. Whereas in Golok Vrindavan, there comes then the mellows of Sakya Ras, Vatsalya Ras, and Madhurya Ras, which is not present in Vaikuntha. Of course, Madhurya is between its eternal concert there, also between Lord Narayan and Lakshmi Devi, but other than that, there's no Madhurya Ras and there's no Vatsalya Ras, like no question of that he would accept parents there, because everyone knows him as the master, as the father of everyone, and also there's no question of friendship, because even friendship means that the relationship is in a way that where you consider yourself equal to the Lord, and thus treat him, are more close to the Lord and treat him more intimately, more casually than if you're servant in Dasya Ras, which is prevalent in Vaikuntha. And Enchanta Ras for those who are in neutrality, who are even further distant from the Lord. So that's why Prabhupada explains here that it is only a basic understanding to understand the Lord as the creator, but beyond that, here, like in the second sentence, Prabhupada says, he's more than a simple creator and destroyer, for there is his feature of ananda, or his pleasure feature. And as I said, this pleasure of simply in exchanges where you are in like kind of formal, where the Lord is, there is everyone knows him as the master, everyone is there in awe and reverence worshipping him. That limits from more intimate exchanges, loving exchanges, and thus more pleasure, which he can experience as Krishna, or even as Lord Ramachandra, but even more than Lord Ramachandra than as Lord Krishna. And because there then comes more, the Aishvarya, the opulence, is then covered over, predominated by his sweetness, his madhurya, where they don't care about Krishna being the God, but they simply are fully naturally attracted to his sweetness, to his beauty, and thus in the different relationships want to serve him, and there can then be the greatest heights of unlimited pleasure that Gopinath is enjoying. And then Prabhupada continues about that for the impersonalists, they can't understand that at all. They cannot even understand the Lord in awe and reverence. Their understanding is simply of his Brahman feature, of his all-pervasive feature, where they have, it is some understanding that they understand it is not the ultimate to simply try to lord over material nature and squeeze out happiness in that way, but that there's a spiritual nature beyond this temporary material manifestation with all its inebrities. And it is good. It allows them to become free from material miseries if they actually realize his brahmacharya, his Brahman feature. But obviously it is very limited in terms of their experiencing real pleasure, because it simply gives them freedom from miseries and allows them to realize the Sat feature only, the eternality, and Sat and some Chit, some knowledge as well. But what is that knowledge? Because initially when I heard that they realize knowledge and eternity, I was thinking, what kind of knowledge is it? Like, it seems, real knowledge is knowledge of our constitutional position as an eternal servant of the Lord, but they don't have knowledge of that. So what knowledge is it? I read the recently, I think, Srila Prabhupada, in one of his small books, one of his lectures, either Path of Perfection or, I think in Path of Perfection. So where Prabhupada explains that what is that knowledge? The knowledge they have is that that they exist, that the sense of I, and that this is eternal. Like, they have full knowledge of that. Whereas fully conditioned souls, everyone would have some feeling of, yes, I'm an individual and I exist, and I don't want to die. And I think, well, I don't think I really die. Like, how can it be? How will it be after death? But they don't have real knowledge of that, and many think that, yes, everything is finished after this lifetime. Whereas impersonalists, they do have the full conviction knowledge that, no, I don't die, I am eternally existing, I'm Brahmana. So, so that is the knowledge that they think, I am, and I am forever. So, which gives some pleasure, which is called Brahmananda. And Srila Prabhupada explains that in a purport in the third canto to text 33, that this Brahmananda is unlimited actually already. But that unlimited pleasure can also be surpassed. That is the nature of the transcendence. Because, to material conception, of course, that sounds quite contradictory. Like, how can it be that even Brahmananda is unlimited, but then it can be surpassed? But Prabhupada beautifully says that is the nature of the transcendence. So the spiritual nature of transcendence is, completely different from our material nature and our material conceptions that we have conditioned in our minds and our intelligence. So, it can be surpassed, and we know it's actually incomparable even, the pleasure that is derived from rendering loving service to the Lord. In fact, Prabhupada explains that in further bit, that the mellow and humor relished by reciprocation of devotional service is incomparable. So, because that is, why is their Ananda, their Brahmananda much, much less? It's because, they only get pleasure from the knowing themselves being eternal and free from miseries, but the real pleasure comes from loving service. And how? More specific, Prabhupada says, the mellow and humor relished by the reciprocation of devotional service. Because, devotional service, it's such a... We, in our beginning stages, we might, as neophytes, do many times kind of mechanically our service, our sadhana, so we might not have so much realization of that in our day-to-day life. But actually, devotional service, in its pure form, it is like a very dynamic, very intense of exchange between the Lord and the devotee in terms of rasas, terms of taste, like mellow and humor, relished by reciprocation of devotional service. So the Lord, He perfectly reciprocates with every single living being, and eternally, and at every moment actually. It's never static. That's an amazing thing about spiritual life, a real spiritual life in devotional service. That, we get some idea from when we hear about the ecstatic love of the gopis and the other Vrajavasis with Krishna, that it is so intense and so with variety and so much Krishna, he at every moment actually does his best, and his best is the best, obviously, to even further increase the love of his pure devotees, which is already unlimited. Like they have nothing else other than pure love for him. So, but yeah, that's the nature of the highest realization of transcendence, of pure devotional service, and especially in its highest manifestation in Golok Vrindavan. And yeah, and also interesting actually here in that verse, before that, in terms of like the realization that the impersonalists have, how to understand that, nicely Prabhupada explains, or rather I quickly read some part of the verse itself that Lord Kapila spoke here, that 32, 33. So Lord Kapila said that a single object is appreciated differently by different senses. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, is one. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one. But according to the different scriptural injunctions, he appears to be different. And because, the impersonal path is also described in the scriptures, and also like worshipping him as through karma kanda for material benefit. So all of that gives a different, and because what are you doing by doing that? Then you see the Lord simply as your maintainer and your supplier. For example, if you worship him just through sacrifices for material benefit, or as impersonal path, as you know, then as Brahman feature. And Prabhupada beautifully there then in the Prabhupada explains that in terms of the impersonalist, that as the same object appears to be different when perceived by different senses, the same Supreme Lord appears to be impersonal by mental speculation. So, that's the point that, the impersonalist, it's based on mental speculation, even though if they do want to follow the scriptures, then okay, they do accept some authorities, but still it is simply mental speculation, in terms of, that we know the Vedas, Krishna says, Vedascha sarvyaham eva vedya vedanta krita vedavita vachaham, that of all the Vedas I'm to be known, I'm the compiler of Vedanta, and if you properly study the Vedas, then you would understand Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth to be personal. But with this mental speculation, mentality or approach, then you come to the impersonal understanding. And and the example given there is just as the same object appears to be different when perceived by different senses. And Prabhupada explains that nicely, that just as one can, as the example with milk, for example, how milk can be perceived differently by different senses. And so Prabhupada says that just as one can appreciate real taste of milk with the tongue and not with the eyes, like with the eyes, for example, if you look at milk, all you see is basically some white liquid. Or with the nostrils or ears, we can imagine. How much can you smell the milk? And how much by simply smelling milk? Okay, you can smell a little bit, maybe a little sweetness or something, but how much can you experience really milk just by smelling or by seeing, or what to speak of hearing? So that's Prabhupada says, and one can similarly. So the example is given. The real taste of milk you can only perceived by your tongue. And so similarly, one can appreciate the Absolute perfectly and with all relishable pleasure only through one path. And that is, of course, devotional service. So, to realize, like such a beautiful way how Prabhupada puts it, to the fact of that you can realize the Bhagavan feature, the real feature of the Absolute Truth, him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. It says here that one can appreciate the Absolute Truth perfectly and with all relishable pleasure only through the one path devotional service. So, because, the real pleasure comes, as said then, in this loving reciprocation, perfect reciprocation between the Lord and the devotees. And yeah, let's continue the purport. So yeah, and then of course greater than the impersonal is the mystic who sees the Lord situated in his heart as Paramatma, the partial representation of the Lord. So yeah, we know the Ashtanga yogis, if they reach perfection, then they are able to see the Lord in his form of Kshirotakashaya Vishnu as Paramatma situated in their heart. But what does the Lord do there? There's the super soul, he doesn't actively engage in pastimes or reciprocate with the Lord, with the devotees, but rather he's there as Upadrasthana Mantacha, as the overseer and permitter. So all he does is there standing on his on the lotus flower and smiling, and he doesn't change at all in that form. Like he's simply there in that manifestation in the heart of every living entity and every atom, as we know. So, which means, yes, they get more pleasure, of course, than the impersonalists, because they can see the Lord's beauty is in this Vishnu form, as Kshirotakashaya Vishnu. And that, of course, gives a lot of pleasure, like so much more than just by realizing the Brahman feature. But still, of course, it is not comparable to the pure devotees because they actively engage in loving devotional service, and thus as we discussed, in an ongoing dynamic reciprocation between the Lord and the devotees. And the Lord always increases the intensity of the love and thus the devotees' desire to serve the Lord, to give pleasure to the Lord, always increases more and more. And that gives then indirectly the pleasure to the devotees ever increasingly. So it is completely incomparable even to the Ashtanga Yoga's realization of the Lord's, seeing the Lord's beauty as the super soul in the heart. And like Prabhupada says here beautifully that, but there are pure devotees who take part in the direct pleasure, ananda potency of the Lord by factual reciprocation of loving service. Because as we said, by simply with the whole thinking, feeling, acting, to wanting to please the Lord, wanting to give pleasure to the Lord, by doing that you take part in the Lord's pleasure potency. And and by doing that, then automatically, because you take part in this pleasure potency, in giving pleasure to the Lord, then you yourself get the greatest pleasure. But the paradoxical thing, of course, is we know that those who do that, the pure devotees, they themselves, they have not a single tinge of wanting to enjoy pleasure. They simply want to give pleasure to the Lord, but by doing that automatically, that's how the nature is, automatically they get the greatest pleasure. In fact, we know so much so that even Krishna comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be able to understand and experience that pleasure of giving pleasure to him. And thus we know he comes in the mood of Srimati Radharani, because she is the one person who personifies this pleasure potency, who is, as we discussed, the Lord, for him to enjoy the highest pleasure, he needs to manifest himself as Srimati Radharani, as the supreme woman in existence. Because that's the feminine, and that's why she said, because that's the very nature for pleasure specifically. The female exists, so that's why in the material world, in the perverted reflection also, that's the strongest way of Maya, of entangling us, of that we seek pleasure in conjugal relationships, in material relationships. And then Prabhupada quotes that the famous verse 1855, that is why to really understand the Lord is only possible in devotional service. Bhaktiyamam abhichanati yamanyastrasi tattva tatumam tattva vishadetad anantaram. And Prabhupada there in Bhagavad Gita in this verse, I remember that he, with the last line, that can Mayavadis, like, they're so foolish that even though the verse, right how it starts is Bhaktya mam abhichanati. Bhaktya means by bhakti, by devotional service only, can you understand me? So it won't, but still, then the Mayavadis interpret in the last line, Vishadatad anantaram, meaning entering into Brahman, into the impersonal feature. But how that wouldn't make any sense, because if you can only understand Krishna, the absolute truth, by devotional service, where there is the necessity of individuality of devotee, the Lord, and the exchange done through devotional service, then why would then ultimately, as a result of doing that perfectly, why would you then become impersonal? So it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, impersonalists, they come up with those things by mental speculation. And yeah. And so Prabhupada concludes then that by development of pure devotional service, one can factually know the Lord as he is and thus be trained in a bona fide service of the Lord and be allowed to enter into direct association of the Lord in so many capacities. The highest glorious association with the Lord is made possible in the planet of Golok Vrindavan, where Lord Krishna enjoys himself with the gopis and his favorite animals, the Surabhi cows. And then he concludes a description of this transcendental land of Krishna is given in the Brahma Samhita, which is considered by Lord Sri Chaitanya to be the most authentic literature in this connection. Okay, maybe a few minutes we can also spend on that point, the last point of Prabhupada being here, that according to Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the most authentic description of this highest planet where Lord Krishna himself enjoys eternally with the gopis, with the gopas and the Surabhi cows especially. To the most authentic knowledge of that is given by Lord Brahma himself in the Brahma Samhita, in the 5th chapter. And we can understand that also by reading Chaitanya Charitamrita in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, that he showed actually how important Brahma Samhita is. Because when I think that must have been while traveling to South India, it's been a while that I read it, but that he came across this Brahma Samhita and that he heard it recited, I think, by assembly of Brahmana Vaishnavas, and so he immediately, very eagerly, took the copy from them, got them to copy it. So then they kept the copy, and he could take the book, and then that, as well as what's it called, the Krishna Kanamrita, I forgot the name. And one other book by Bilva Mangal Thakur, very famous book about the glories of Krishna and the pure love of his devotees. So those two books, he very ecstatically took copies of, and then to his most intimate devotees, he when he on the way back, when he met again Ramananda Roy, he immediately got him or someone again take copies. Like back then, that's how there was no printing of books like we have it nowadays, but they had to write copies of the whole book. So I think he got him to do, or someone else, that he very ecstatically they shared and relished those books specifically. So, and then also I remember, I think with Vasudev Dutt is I think so. Like one other associate, then when he came back, he told personally that just for you I brought these books. I want to share, and then all the main associates, Mahaprabhu, they got enthusiastically made copies and got those books. That's Brahma Samhita, and where our head of our Sampradaya, Lord Brahma himself, beautifully describes, after he got the vision by the mercy of the Lord, of Golok Vrindavan itself, of the highest planet in all existence. And why is it the highest, as we heard in this purport today? Because there Krishna enjoys eternally in this highest pure love with, not only with like apparently human beings, like gopis, gopas, but even as we hear here with, who are especially dear to him, the cows, the Surabhi cows. So, yeah, in Golok Vrindavan there's not a single thing which is not a pure devotee of Krishna, and which is in pure ecstatic love, like such as the cows and even even the river Yamuna, so the water, even all the trees, the plants, everything there is a devotee, and which means is like fully conscious and in fully Krishna conscious, in pure love for Krishna, and is fully, thus fully taking part in this ananda potency of the Lord, in His pleasure potency, because they simply think, act, feel for the pleasure of the Lord, and thus they are in acting under this pleasure potency. And yeah, actually another point I wanted to come from now, going back to the start where we said that yes, Krishna is the summum bonum, so all energies emanate from Him and act perfectly according to His will. And and the devotees in Vaikuntha and in other parts of the world where the Lord is worshipped in awe and reverence as the creator, as the controller, so they understand that. But in Golok Vrindavan, it is not even only, you can say, that everything is perfectly acting according to His will. I mean, ultimately, yes, but there, what is ruling there? It is simply pure love, and so much so that the Krishna takes pleasure in putting aside his desires, as we know from pastimes, like what is there? Like there's much better examples, but right now what comes to mind is, for example, when no, that's not a good. Sorry, I may come back to it later if something comes. But yeah, where we know that Krishna has one plan, but then he puts it aside because of his love for his devotees and of his pure love of his devotees, but doing that actually, and we know everything is happening so perfectly in Golok Vrindavan under the direction of Yogamaya, which is obviously also one of his potencies, so it's under his control, but still actually this Yogamaya, by his will, then it even sometimes bewilders Krishna himself. So we know that he himself seems to forget things like when, like for example, when Agasura, when all the gopas walk into the mouth of Agasura, the huge snake demon, that Krishna for a moment he seems bewildered, that he doesn't know, what shall I do now, like such a calamity. But of course that is by Yogamaya that he also takes pleasure in taking this anxiety and apparently not knowing what to do, how to solve the situation. And so there in Golok Vrindavan it's even in such a way that sometimes it appears that it is not even under the control of Krishna or not according directly to Krishna's desire, but ultimately it is, because it is always perfectly everything happening to to further increase the pure love for Krishna, which the devotees have there, and that's his greatest pleasure, and so that's his greatest desire ultimately. Okay, so on time. Krantarachima Bhagavatam Ke Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ke Jai.